Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this to another level.
If you're a leader of an organization, if you're the top leader of an organization, that your consciousness constrains what can possibly happen in the organization. You're the upper limit. So things could go above your developmental level for a little while, but they're not going to last.
Who is Michael Spayd?
That's a good question. I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. Can I get back to you, Miljan?
I'll get back to you in the next lifetime.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a date. Well, I'm a lot of things like everybody. Most significantly for your audience, probably, I am the co-founder of the Agile Coaching Institute with Lisa Adkins back in 2010. The shaper of the designer, really, of the Agile Coaching competency framework that people know, the X-wing diagram with facilitating, coaching, mentoring, teaching. And one of the original definers of the enterprise coaching track for IC Agile, and the co-author of Agile Transformation, using the integral Agile transformation framework to think and lead differently. And I've been involved in this field for about 21 years. Actually, just the same year the manifesto was signed was when I was first a coach. And so I've kind of grown up with this industry, and I've tried to bring a different kind of outsider's perspective to it, and outside thinking and training, like professional coaching, like organization development, OD, like culture, like leadership development, like systemic constellations. So I've tried to enrich the Agile environment, which was concerned with Agile transformation so much, which is not a technical thing to do, right? It's a very OD thing to do. And I've recently started something new. I think that's probably good. Anything else you think you want to ask me that would be helpful for people to know?
No, it's just I usually like you said, people struggle to define sometimes who is who, and there's a lot more. And I think a lot of things that you said, people know. What are some of the things that people may not know about Michael?
Yeah, right. Well, they might not know about Michael that he has been a student of esoteric wisdom for many, many years, including Tibetan Buddhism, including different kinds of, I hesitate to call it occult, but, non-traditional kinds of schools of thought, spiritual schools of thought of different kinds, shamanism. I've been a student of shamanism for many, many years. So I bring and I don't always say that in public. Fortunately, it's just the three of us here. So I'm sure this is a confidential room, right?
For now.
Yeah, right. Till we publish. I don't know. I could probably come up with something else, but I don't know if it would be useful right now.
Great. No, it's thank you for sharing that. And I think you're being very generous when you're describing yourself. I think the impact that you've had on the Agile community and the way that you've helped Agile community define a lot of this stuff and give us a direction, I think, is, at least I appreciate. I know many others appreciate, and especially with your new work, I think this is something that will be a guide for future agile coaches and practitioners, how to integrate some of these concepts that have been around for decades. I just think a lot of things in agile we've adopted. So I just want to say thank you, and for being generous in your description, or who is Michael, but I think you've done a lot for our community, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. I know it. I can see in students' eyes that it's really impactful to them, and it's like the most meaningful work that I could possibly do. I've been had a series of what I call downloads of a vision for starting an organization for the last year and a half or so. Actually almost 2 years, but even longer than that. And it's called The Collective Edge, and it's about working at the edge of our consciousness and what we can do in relevant things that affect the whole planet, really, and our human ecosystem. And I originally drafted Michael Hammond and Lisa Atkins to help ground that, and reunited after a long time apart in 2019. And we went through a series of things together, and Lisa eventually found a sort of a more distant position from the whole thing. She wants to have a lifestyle business, really, rather than really growing a company seriously. But Michael Hammond and I had a long-term partnership in creating things together and having a really good time teaching together. And he and I started to spend a lot more time together, and really emerged an enterprise coaching school. So that became the first business line of the Collective Edge, and it's owned by Michael. I'm not, I'm his partner in, helping develop programs and stuff, but he's really leading that. And so in parallel to that, for the last, I'm sorry this is so long, but I think it's going to be useful.
No, it's really helpful.
So and then in the pretty much during the exact same period, Marie and I were hanging out together a lot. We met about the same time that the downloads were coming in, and she was very curious about what was going on in the Collective Edge. She had, she's new to Agile, but you would never know that. I mean, she's studied so much stuff in Agile. It makes my head spin. It makes my head hurt, actually, sometimes. I mean, the amount of time she sends me something in text, like, you got to watch this. I'm like, when do you have time to do anything else? You're on to it. I've just listened to the last thing you sent, and so she's been stretching my personal thinking for a year and a half, really, and it sort of finally came together as during the pandemic. The whole thing was really quiescent, right? It was just nothing was happening, almost next to nothing was happening. And then this year it started to heat up. You could feel a shift happen, and we've been trying to find what's the right seat for everybody in the Collective Edge. And the right seat for Marie is to be the chief operating officer. So we haven't right now. You can't tell anybody, because we haven't announced that yet. But by the time you folks are seeing this, she's been announced as being the COO. And
congrats.
She's just the perfect person for this job. And so.
So great. That's a good segue into, who is Marie? A lot of people might be asking, who is Marie Murtagh?
Oh, wow. The most correct way to answer that question is I'm me. But a little bit about my story anyways. So let's see, in 1993 or something, I started into organizational IT actually as a developer. And then I graduated from there into project management and had a pretty healthy career that started off and took me from a medium-sized organization and over to the West Coast for an adventure with a startup organization. And from there, I ended up going to London, to the UK, and did project management within Deloitte for a few years. And in around, a few years ago, or around 2011 or something like that, I decided to leave that because I was successful as a project manager, and I felt my team was really sort of electrified and enjoyed working with me, but I felt that there was just this sort of incongruence with project management. And I was very confused by that, like, what is going on here? And experienced, some pain sort of in the corporate environment at that time. And so anyways, life took me in a few other directions, which is always fun, just to see where life sort of leads you. And then around 4 or so years ago, I went on this deep journey to look very deeply at what is here, who am I, who are other people, what is going on, what is the universe, and
down the rabbit hole, man.
yeah. And
she dug the rabbit hole.
And around 2 years ago, I heard about Agile, and it lit such a fire inside of me, because I saw it like, oh, thank God, finally they get it, that we're humans inside of this organization, right? And the humans are what make up an organization. And as I sort of journeyed deeper into that, and sort of reflecting back on my previous experience, realizing that, I was kind of working in organizations that treated people more like machines or more like resources. So it made sense to me then why I didn't exactly love it. And so then it's become, with all of these things that I've learned and that I've been taking in, and the healing and et cetera, then taking a look at my life and what am I really doing with it, and how, what's the impact that I want to leave here? How do I want to help other people, and working inside or with organizations to help them transform, and helping people to live more into their humanity, so that we all have, more fulfilling lives, and step more into, of course, our potential. Agile's where I sort of settled, and with stumbling across Michael and Agile of 2019, and a couple of other big concepts that sort of came across my plate at that time too. It's been, I was on a certain path, a trajectory anyways, upwards, but since then it's gone, whoo, really very straight up. And I'm just, to be honest with you, I'm just really very delighted and honored, excited, a little nervous, all of that about the role that I'm stepping into here. I'm happy.
It is interesting, and I think a lot of this is emerging too. Like some of the things that Michael has been doing and that's doing is not the mainstream, right? Some of the stuff that we're talking about is the next level of coaching or transformation, and it's connected to a bigger movement. This is much bigger than Agile. This is much bigger than us. And we're just, the way that I understand it, a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but especially in the context of what Michael is doing with Collective Edge, is what others have been trying to do outside of Agile and outside of business. So as much as to some, this might seem like a completely new thing, it's not necessarily new. And there are many people across the globe that are trying to contextualize these things to their in their context.
Yeah.
So maybe before we kind of dive deeper into some of this stuff, what is Collective Edge? How would you describe it?
You want to go first, Ruth?
Mhm. Well, I feel like anyways, in terms of where a lot of us have found ourselves and maybe find ourselves today, it's in living and being in a certain way that doesn't feel really true to our nature. And there's a sense, I think, inside of all of us too, that there's more to life, or there's something should be different. Come on, there's got to be something else, right? And in a way, and I'm not speaking just from a seeking sort of perspective, but also there's this unknown part of things, and there's a conventional way, right, that we've all been living and stepping into and working, and this collective edge is outside of that conventional, but that can show up in so many different ways, right? But and I think too, we're always kind of living on an edge anyways, and being sort of deliberate and conscious about it, and thinking, what is the right edge anyways? What's the right boundary that I need to push within myself, that I can help others to push, right? That's going to expand everybody's understanding, appreciation, ability to navigate in this very complex world, so that we can all, benefit and thrive.
Yeah, that just made me think of maybe before we get Michael's thoughts, but just maybe to share my thoughts on just what you just said. And, I've heard collective edge a lot of times, but I didn't see it from that perspective. And now almost like a little light bulb went on, and I don't know how true it is, but a lot of what I think collective edge stands in this movement is about the new paradigm. I think what you're describing is one of the things that you have on the front of your website, a quote from Miljan Twist: the old structures and systems are no longer serving us. And not necessarily that they're bad, but I think what's happening is our paradigm is changing, and it's changing in a way where our world is becoming more complex, where things are becoming messier. And I think when you just described collective edge, it was at that edge of the new paradigm. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tom Kuhn's cycle, the guy that came up with the word paradigm, where at the beginning, I think, of something else that's going to emerge. So the collective edge is that, at least for me, what it resonated with is that the next, at the verge of the new science, what he calls the new science, or the new norm, or the new paradigm. So, and that's weird to a lot of people, and a lot of stuff that people hear. Like when I talk to some of the people, a lot of stuff that maybe collective edge might stand for, be like, these guys are smoking something or doing something and thinking about and that's okay. Like a lot of times that's what it sounds to people that are embedded in the current paradigm. They can't really see the new paradigm. So I like the collective edge now. It's making more sense to me as far as why I don't know if that's what you meant, but I don't know if I was like, well, yeah. I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, in terms of it being, a new paradigmatic thing. So it's not understandable within the frame of the old paradigm. It's just not. I mean, orange organizations can't get purpose-driven organizations. They don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. It seems stupid to them, or fuzzy-headed or whatever. But we're in Frederick Laloux's terms, reinventing organizations. We're starting a teal organization, or more precisely, technically, I would call it a second tier organization. It's not necessarily just teal, but people will know it potentially as teal, and that's the idea. It's purpose driven. It's not money driven. It's not materialist driven. Not that we don't plan to make a lot of money, but and it's from like a consensus, as Ray was talking, I was thinking from a consensus reality point of view, the collective edge, it has a center, and it has multiple business units. About 4 of them have been defined at some level of detail. One of them is actually
an instance. It's a real business, integral sense making and action, that Michael Hammond heads. There's another one that's sort of starting to come online that I'm not going to talk about. It's too early to talk about that, but it's started to form. And the other ones are more, there's energetic imprints that suggest that it might happen, but we don't know who the leader is of them or whatever. So it's meant to be a turquoise in Spiral Dynamics incubator of businesses. So it's meant to have a tension between the ownership, like that the Collective Edge doesn't own the whole thing. As a Collective Edge, actually, we haven't worked out the details of this, but it's going to be a minority partner in the business, so that the business could detach, could buy itself out and become independent if it wanted to, or if it was ready to.
So what that's really, I want to pause here, because we live in an orange world where legally we have to structure by orange rules, and you're trying to create organization that's, teal or turquoise. And how do you fit like something like that into?
So I mean, you have to think differently. Obviously, you have to be at a different level of development to be able to let go of certain kinds of ego things that really get in the way and are very prevalent or characteristic of Orange. And I have a really good lawyer, and what he taught me is that what you're doing with a contract is you're making private law. So you're making a law that's defined, can't violate the everybody's law, obviously, but it can be exactly how you want it to be within those things. So we'll create private law around how those organizations fit together to give them, by structuring into the operating agreement buyout clause. We haven't worked out all that detail because it hasn't been pressing to do that yet. And when you're doing a startup, you've got way too much to do. So there's 4 business units that have sort of appeared. One is operational, and Marie and I hold the center. So Marie and I are in the center of this, which is sort of the umbrella of it. And so and Michael leads ISA, and I'm his partner in that. I'm his one of his principals. To because I love doing that kind of work, but it's his business.
So could we talk maybe a little bit about? So maybe we can explore. So the TCE Center is in the center, the Collective Edge Center, and like, as you said, when I saw this diagram that was shared with me, it reminded me obviously of Holland's and Sociocracy, Holacracy. So it's more of a, when we're talking about, going back to the quote from Lyanne Twist, the structure and systems are outdated. We're talking about more decentralized network type of organizational structure. And you're probably, if you're saying you're pushing towards turquoise, you're probably pushing even Sociocracy, Holacracy, I'm assuming, to another level. Maybe not.
I think that's really plausible, but I wouldn't want to stand behind that yet, because we don't know. I don't think. But I think that seems pretty likely. Marie, you were trying to get in, I think, before.
That's okay. To comment on your question, actually, Miljan, about coming from second tier in the Orange world, and one of the things that just sort of came up for me is you have to, so acknowledging and noticing, right, the orangeness of what we're all trying to navigate, and then you have to kind of step outside of it and look at it sort of objectively and from the outside. And there's where things like what Michael and his lawyer organized in terms of seeing it with a new lens and doing a private law type thing. That's what I was thinking of. And I appreciate very much, sort of the questions that your particular question there around sociocracy and holacracy. And what really comes up for me is, those are fascinating, and they're doing a lot of amazing work, right? And also in sort of shifting and bringing in new paradigms and giving people new options of a way of working and of being, thank God, right? And I feel like anyways, also too, that from my perspective and where I sit sort of in the collective edge, I look at organizations like that, and I feel that, it would be good for us to have a good, like, I don't want to call it it's not a working relationship, but, be organizational sort of buddies, whatever. And when I think about even like how I am with my buddies, right, there is this whole, sort of really truth telling, right, to each other and having fun. And there's also a little bit of accountability, right? And so I'm not, I wouldn't expect any organization to step in or to take that on per se, but that's where I kind of put a flag in the ground for me anyways.
So what you're saying is, and I think, let me just paraphrase it. So like sociocracy, holacracy represent this new paradigm. So what you're saying is really like we all believe or have similar beliefs in the sense of we should be partnering and talking to each other and finding out ways to collaborate. When I was talking to James Priest, he was specific about, because I was trying to push him a little bit, like why S3 is not expanding a little bit more in a sense. And one of the things he was saying, hey, I have a niche, right? And which is totally understandable, totally, but like he understands similar stuff that we've talked about. He has the same perspective, same understanding of the emerging future, and it feels good, at least to me, to talk to. It's not that there's that in everyday life that I can get a chance to talk about some of the stuff that's emerging. So is that really what you're describing when you said like we need to partner and things like that, that it's more of a that type of partnership?
I think it's interesting. So I would say, partnership, and in a way, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of expectations on that, but I feel like it's a playfulness, and it's more like a buddy system.
Well, and what Murray was saying before, James Priest is actually on our list of, we've identified a number of what Murray was talking about, organizational friends. Like you have friends, and then if you have a spouse or whatever, you have couple friends, right? And organizations can have friends too. I mean, and not just strategic business relationships. I mean, that might happen, but it might not. You might just want to hang out with each other because you do similar kind of things, and you could learn from each other without an agenda, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what I meant. Like, maybe when I don't know. Yeah. Maybe partner wasn't the correct term, but yeah, that's exactly what I meant. More like a friend.
It could. Yeah. Well, no, it could lead to a partnership for sure, but you don't have, that's not the criteria for doing it. The criteria for doing it is you share purpose and you like each other.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think different from the orange paradigm, right? It doesn't have that competitive nature.
Right.
It's not competition. There's no shortage of ways to help.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Cool. That's very interesting. Maybe I thought we could explore, and I know Michael's not here, but like the School of Integral Sense Making and Action. Because I think that's important, and like that's another example, I think, that where you're not necessarily agile community, but pushing things to what's coming, what we need to focus on. I think I believe if I was in your shoes, I would be doing that. So it's like seeing you do it. It's like, oh, this guy or this group is thinking in the same lines as me. And why was it for you? Maybe just to see your perspective, and maybe you can speak for Michael Hammond as well. What was behind the School of Integral Sense Making? And I want to focus on that integral sense making in action.
Sure, and I'm gonna also kind of a theme I'd like to explore is how we're using our own methodologies to start and run the collective edge.
Great,
that's really important, I think. Yeah. So integral sense making in action is a transformational leader training and development program. Often enterprise agile coaches, but they could be a transformation lead from a company or something. We have two parts of the core curriculum. One is called Master Camp, which is like a 5-day thing that's spread over 2 weeks plus there's a significant follow-up session a couple of weeks later. So it's got a fairly big container. And it focuses on everything about enterprise coaching at the learning level, not at the competency level, but at the learning level, right? Systems entry, how to do leadership development. What's your own leadership development, style, like in terms of the leadership circle, which is our standard tool for that. How do you work with culture? Where's a culture match? How do you work with structure? All those kind of things. Actually exploring the 4 integral quadrants from the book. Right. So the program is a synthesis of my book and Michael's book. So Michael wrote a book called Evolve Agility. I wrote Agile Transformation, and we sort of mashed them up in integral sense making and action. And actually are going to be including have started to include human systems development, Glenda Oyoung's work. That Marie, I knew about Glenda, like with a lot of things, I knew about Glenda, but she was in the session. We actually met without knowing it in Glenda Oyoung's session at Agile 2019, and then she took Marie took the certification in HSD, and that encouraged me to take it. So I crashed the party and joined too. So one of the thing about Evolve Agility, Michael's book is about deliberate sense making, and the whole mindset, the whole I leadership quadrant is about sense making, how we make sense, right? And there's the integral levels described, from amber to orange to green to teal describes a different way of making sense. It's not about the content, but the how one thinks and the how one makes meaning, how one makes, what's the patterning of how we tell stories to ourselves. Because we always tell stories to ourselves about who we are, which are frankly false stories, but we believe them and they shape our life pretty well. So we do. So one of the things we teach, in the master camp, and we continue it in the expert cohort program, is deliberate sense making. So the expert cohort program is like an 8-month program to become an IC Agile expert in enterprise coaching, and to also get our certification in enterprise coaching. So it's a competency-based program instead of a knowledge-based program. So deliberate sense making is a thing for us, right? And so we're using that in the company. We have a practice ourselves of deliberate sense making, of revealing. I'm finding myself getting a little nervous right now. I'm finding myself getting anxious to say this. We're not sure, revealing our own what's coming up for us, because that's part of how we make sense, so that then it becomes public, in the meeting or whatever. And then it can be, everybody can understand their own sense making better, and we can make better decisions together instead of arguing for our, orange argues for its point, it debates.
Exactly.
Second tier, wants to construct, wants to co-create.
Well, that's the thing. And there's a couple of things that I guess, is kind of coming up for me in sense of what's going through my head. One is that sense making. I think from a perspective of maybe next organizations, next coaching, especially in Agile, it's really to me it's really essential for us to understand that. So for instance, if I'm going in and understanding organization, what type of leaders I'm dealing with, if I can get people to exactly what you described now, what you describe is people being vulnerable and being open, because I have to have a courage and be vulnerable to say that's, hey, I'm nervous, this is what's going through my head. So that amplifies that collaboration, that amplifies that co-creation. So I think from that perspective, that's a huge gap that in the business world, across the gap that we have, that I think is being fulfilled, or at least being made aware of more from that perspective. So That's that's what came to mind from that. But what are you seeing when it comes to applying this to your collective edge? And you have several partners, you have several of these, structure. How are you using sense making with each other?
Well, let me talk about a slightly different angle, if that's all right. Because it's so one of the things that we wrote in the book and that I have emphasized in my consulting for quite a while is what I really understood from working with the leadership circle for the past 9 years, which is that if you're a leader of an organization, if you're the top leader of an organization, that your consciousness constrains what can possibly happen in the organization. You're the upper limit. So things could go above your developmental level for a little while, but they're not going to last. So what that translates into is what I call me first problem solving. That if I'm the leader of an organization, that I'm the first problem to be solved. Because, and I know this directly in this case, because I tried to do this 6 years ago. I tried to start the equivalent of the collective edge 6 years ago, and it didn't work. Didn't work at all. It was a very painful experience. And I can feel that in the 6 years since then, that I've grown into a different person, into a different leader. And part of why have hired Marie is because so if I'm the first problem, you need somebody to be aware of that. You need somebody who can give you really intimate and detailed and not pulling punches.
Candid.
Yeah, candid. And Marie does that. Yeah, Marie does that for me better than anybody I've ever known in my life. So she can get inside my defenses and tell me how it is, and that's like so important as a leader for somebody. Usually people comply to senior leaders, right? They just, oh yeah, that's a stupid idea, but I'm not going to tell you that because I might get fired. Or you're acting like a jerk right now. I mean, you don't tell senior leaders that most times, but that's bullshit. That's like so not right. Yeah. So Marie, you want to say anything about that?
Mm-hmm.
Don't make me spit out my water, okay?
So first of all, I would say, it's not, I don't say it quite like that, but the things that you use there to describe, how I do, and it gets reflected back in the system too, right? But I also just want to say what I feel like anyways in all of this, and I think congruent even with what you were talking about, Miljan, is, well, you as your own leader, and how are you having conversations with yourself? What are you talking about? And what are you really, what are you ignoring? What are you repressing? What are you glossing over? What are you bigging up? What are you putting down? This conversation within myself is what I've been having, what I continue to have, and what is sort of my guide for how to have that same conversation with other people.
So essentially I have to work on myself before I can help others.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. That's the premise both of the ISA Enterprise Coach Training Program, and it's also the position of the transformational coaching that we do in consulting.
So now I get it. I heard you say, Michael, that we're screwed as a society. Now I get why we're screwed as a society. How many people do you know that want to work on themselves? How many leaders? If the ceiling and this, what you're saying is also.
I'm working with one right now.
Wow.
And they're a significant, they're a small company, but they're, significantly growing, and they're decidedly successful.
Mhm.
So it's not anybody. Well, I can't even say that. I want to, say it's not the Fortune 1000, but that's not completely true. I mean, the leadership circle has clients, Roche, pharmaceuticals, Honda, Disney, where the very top leaders are taking a really serious look at themselves.
It does, but
I'm
we
not
could
involved
go
in that
back
work.
to, you're familiar with the percentage of people that are part of that second tier or thinking or seeing from the, so it's a very small, so that's why I joke around, because it's a big, as the complexity in our world is increasing, it's a big ask to get people in organizations to focus on developing themselves, focusing on that inner work so they can help others, because they don't even see themselves as a bottleneck. They don't even see themselves as the ones, and a lot of times people have right intentions from their perspective. It's just that they're not seeing things.
And I just want to say too, it's not that I wouldn't want to place blame necessarily on anyone except for our Western culture, to be honest with you, because I think it really sets everything up from the way that when we're born and how we're developed and our education, et cetera. Most of our, all of that is very externalized, right? All external work. And I think in Eastern cultures, they have kind of the opposite, it's a little lopsided, possibly in the other direction. I don't know, I'm making something up there, but I do want to say, so I think for us anyways, it is, the self in a way is kind of the next frontier. But I also want to say though, I feel, and what has been my own experience is that it's through myself, right, that I can help others, but it's also because then you recognize the unity, the interconnectedness, like in a really deep level of all of this. And that, so I feel like, and within the ISA, there's another course or cohort program, right? The Inner Path, which is beautiful, right? Leading into the self and taking really deep looks about non-judgmental as well, right? Compassionate looks at ourselves. But then I feel like what seems to happen is then, and even actually congruent with the integral or spiral dynamics, right? At yellow, you're kind of self and systemic sort of oriented, right? And then when you go into the turquoise, right, then you integrate that with the unity consciousness.
So maybe that's a really good point. And maybe to bring it back to Collective Edge and how you've structured. So essentially, it's the second tier type of organization. The governance and ownership is something that is pretty interesting in how you have essentially you're creating a platform for partnerships, for friendship, for people that have that same purpose. There's also that battle between agency and communion. And how are you balancing that? As far as that structure and what we want individually versus as a group where we want to strive.
One of Marie's favorite topics. So I want to talk about the advice process. Do you want to say something else first about agency and community more generally?
About just of course that it really leans of course into the polarity nature of the universe, and that the agency, right, is really the masculine and the communion usually being associated with the feminine. And anyways, the point is that in all of us and everything, there's sort of a spectrum of that. And I kind of look at all of this anyways, and you look at the Tao, right, and the flow of things and nature, right, and you're going in between and out of the other one. And sorry, I'm getting a little bit lost, but I'll come back around. What I'm saying, I think, with it is that change
it's
is
a balance, right?
It's balance, but it's also it's things are constantly moving. Change is constantly happening. You are flowing from one to the next. Balance, I think, is largely, it's my favorite thing to say, that it's asymmetrical. And then I also feel that from the other research and things that I've done, and what I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to test out here in the Collective Edge, is that when a system is in balance, change is simple.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So how do you
easy is right is one of our watchwords.
Yeah.
If it's easy, it's because it's right.
And it's right so like maybe just to explore that, and I think I touched upon it before, but right is defined differently from different perspectives. So when we talk about Collective Edge, it's a collection of like-minded people looking possibly or wanting to look from that second tier. How do you add diversity and avoid groupthink, yet at the same time acknowledge that we need to look from that second tier in order to deal with the...
Well, I want to come back to the advice process and agency and communion aspect, what I think will at least partially address what you're asking.
Sure.
So what Frederick Laloux described in teal organizations was that they don't make decisions by the person in charge or their rank or something makes all the decisions, but they also don't make decisions by consensus, because that's what pluralistic green does. And frankly, little is more annoying than being stuck in consensus hell where you can't get to consensus. It's not at all useful. It's a stage that people go through. It's reasonable and it's better than autocratic decision making, but it's completely inefficient. So the advice process is about that the person who has, the scope, where it's their business to do something, that you can't just go out and, if you're the event coordinator, you can't just go over into the salesperson's business and make decisions for them. But within your sphere of what you do, you get to make your own decisions. And the rule is, or the guidance is, that you have to have a conversation with the people who will be impacted, who are stakeholders in that decision. You don't have to agree with them, and you don't have to get them to agree with you. You have to listen to them. And then after you've listened to them, then you have to take accountability. Mary and I were just talking about this last night, that the question to ask is from the outsider's point of view. Let's say it's my decision rights to make. Maurice's question to me is, so are you ready to take accountability for that decision? Which means I've given you my advice, which might suggest that you slow down, and you're deciding to do it anyway. Okay, that's your prerogative. Are you ready to take accountability for it? I mean, that's like the perfect balance for me of agency and communion, because I can make my own decisions. I don't have to be constrained, but I also have to take the communion consequences of it. Because I could screw up. It could be a totally stupid decision. But if I have to convince everybody, I can't trust my own gut completely, and I can't be autonomous. I can't have real sovereignty.
My question was to build on that. If you have somebody thinking from a green that likes consensus, and that is like this advice process for me, and you want to have people in green and orange in the sense to have a healthy system. You don't want to just group of, part of Collective Edge group of people that are just, so that I'm assuming you haven't dealt with that yet, but that's something that you're going to probably deal with at some point.
Just starting to. Were you trying to get in there?
Well, I want to say, okay, right. So, well, we all know too, it hasn't been presence or anything here yet, but of course the developmental lines within all of spiral dynamics and within integral, right? And so in kind of each and every moment or each one of those developmental lines, right? People, our individual self can be at different levels within that. Sure. Right? Within that intelligence, if you will. And so there is, in a sense, a lot of diversity that's already here. If you get, to that level with it.
It's which one dominates, yeah.
Yeah, and what's happening in the moment, right? What are we talking about? What's the subject? What's the context? And I think also, though, what is so funny to me, and I feel the need to say, is that with just being really very centered sort of in green, what occurred to me as we were having this discussion, and what makes it such a difficult sort of, and we call it consensus hell, right, is that if you think about us as individuals, we're so freaking unique anyways, right? No two life experiences are the same. No two minds are the same. So for you to try to really go forward with just a complete, consensus-based organization, wonder
silly why. Anyway. It is. And I think I really like the advice process, but you have to come from that. I think the advice process in anything below the second tier can be really challenging because it's judging. I think so that's why I said, in a sense, somebody from Orange will probably dislike the advice process, yet and there will be a lot more judging than you would be, let's just say, from green or teal.
So maybe, but so you lead us to another point, which is we're setting up a deliberately developmental environment. What Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy talk about in Everyone organizations, which is having people are put in an assignment both because they at least could be good at it, but also because it will develop and grow them. So you don't just put somebody in a position where they're great and they just keep knocking it out of the park. That doesn't help them at all. That doesn't grow them at all. So part of having orange or green diversity in the collective edge will be in helping them be in the advice process and get over their concerns about that, or help them sort of do a little hand-holding of them through that process, including their, what they're uncomfortable with or whatever, and also a little push. You need challenge and support both. So as long as if you don't have enough people at second tier, it's going to be hard to hold it, right? So you have to have a critical mass of people at second tier, I think, to hold the whole structure. But then within that, you could have people that are at different developmental levels, younger people, or whatever. I mean, that's absolutely. We're about to hire somebody like that. I'm pretty sure.
Same way that we have people that are holding the orange, and you have different, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I also
maybe.
I just want to say too, I think it's very important to recognize though that all of those stages are absolutely necessary in all of our developments, right? And so in our job within ourselves and with each other and within organizations is to help the healthy side of that manifest.
And full growth through those. I think we haven't had a chance to talk about the shadows and all of that stuff, but full growth through those. And I think that's something for a separate topic, but maybe to come back again to the collective edge. So in summary, what I understand it to be is a platform to experiment and understand what the second tiers organizations would look like. So in a sense, what Lalou describes is that, teal and turquoise type of organizations, the mission for Collective Edge, I'm assuming, is maybe to show the world what those type of organizations look like, to incubate those type of organizations, to bring together friends, partners that want to build that. Is that how you see it? Because given through our conversation, that's what's emerging and that's what I'm seeing.
Marie, I'll give you first crack.
Oh, I just was very excited actually when I was hearing. So, and it was, you were presenting actually something a little bit differently for me that kind of sent me in a little different sort of thinking that I'm going to have to let settle before I can say much. So, thank you, Michael.
Good answer. Mine's less intelligent than that. So I wouldn't say that I would say that is aligned with our mission. I wouldn't say that is our mission,
Okay.
per se. I mean, I think it's aligned with our purpose, which is to, work at the cutting edge and help other people work at the cutting edge, in the interest of anti-fragility, awareness, and love.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an instance of doing that, but it's not like we're specifically trying to model as our product or whatever how to be a second-tier organization. That's an artifact a little bit. I mean, but it's all integrated, right? Because for us to actually use the practices we're advocating to run our own organization, just as like drinking your own champagne.
It's like the way that I see it is like you can we don't know, but maybe we can imagine what it was to go into Orange before, so like there were a lot of companies that would probably looked weird that were trying to figure things out, they didn't know, and 100 years later you can reflect back and say this is what came out of that, this is how we evolved, this is what we learned. What I see Collective Edge, I guess, or companies like Collective Edge are trying to figure out how we're going to deal with the challenges that we're currently dealing with, that we're not doing a very good job of solving, but also how we're going to go forward. And I'm assuming you don't have all the answers, but and maybe but you have a purpose and you have a vision, you have a mission. I'm assuming the way that I look at it is you have a broader purpose and vision, and then your mission is something more achievable.
Well, in Teal, as Lalo identified for us, one, people at that level trust the wisdom beyond rationality. Mm-hmm. So we're being guided where we're going. We're not inventing this out of, like some kind of master plan or something. Yeah. When in the native traditions, they talk about becoming a hollow bone that spirit can blow through. Mm-hmm. And that's what I feel like I've been trying to do for, 20 or 50 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm better at it than I used to be. Mm-hmm. I'm not perfect at it, of course, but I'm a lot better at it than I used to be. And so this is a new level of being able to manifest that. Like this maybe seem like a silly example, but I ran at Agile Coaching Institute, like a $2.2 million organization, and sold it to Accenture, which was, I was pretty proud of that. But now my sights are a lot higher than that. I'm hope to grow a $5 million organization in a few years. And part of being serious about that is hiring people like Marie to challenge me. And also like completely trusting. You got to find the right seat for people, right? You have to find that you go here. Like the first one was Michael belongs as the leader of integral sense making and action, not us together. Even that was tempting to be us together, but that wasn't the right answer. The right answer was him. I'm my job is the center, not that. And so finding those right people and trusting them. And the example I was going to give you was like Marie and I have talked about lately, like the importance of health, of diet and exercise as a that got kind of totally blown out by the pandemic. All those habits and stuff got kind of crushed for me at least. But like that's that would be if I wasn't in really good health and whatnot, I can't do this job as well. It'll help me to be clearer and cleaner, like, just trying to move to a keto diet now to burn cleaner fuel inside me helps me get out of the way. It's not just my laziness or my, my indulgences of myself.
So it does. I mean, it's you're looking at the whole thing. You're not just looking at so it's a holistic where you without getting but you're looking at it holistically as a whole person. So yeah, I mean that is very interesting, and I think I'm excited to see how this is going to shape and where it's going to go, because I think it'll encourage others to try similar things.
Yeah,
so.
I certainly hope so.
Mhm.
So what would be, as we're finishing up here, and I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours. What would be your message maybe to the community, or maybe something that I didn't know to ask you? What would you like to say in closing, Marie?
I think what's coming up for me anyways is in the question that I ask myself as I am becoming myself. And of course, we're all always in a process of becoming ourselves. And sometimes it comes more online and becomes more conscious and deliberate. But then same thing is happening, right, for the collective edge as an organization. It's becoming itself. And then and that sort of, when I think about anyways, the purpose of it is not necessarily right for the collective edge to be a star that, when we go away or whatever or something, right, that it burns out. But how do we become ourselves at the same time that builds something so that there's a legacy?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like too that this is where, it's around the organizational buddies and friends and things like that, and holding each other sort of accountable to that legacy. And yeah, right, which will become the thing, right, that a couple hundred years or whatever from now, people will look back and that's what they will determine was, the benefit or what really came out of it, or the advantages of it. So
that's a good way to put it, and that talks about the mission, and the vision and the purpose. So
Yep, that's why we're ending with that.